I am happy to join you guys here. We're broadcasting on Facebook and on Zoom, so we're going to have some folks chiming in from multiple different places. So again, my name is Joe. I'm the CEO of the Palm Beach Tech Association, joining you from the outside of my condo, where there may or may not be a cat jumping around in the background at any one point. So apologies for that. And we're really lucky to have SKOUT Cybersecurity here with us today. They are a MSSP, so a managed service security provider. They work with a lot of major companies throughout the country, and really the world actually, to help understand what the threats are and monitor the potential threats going on out there in cybersecurity. One of the things that I heard come up this week that actually it'd be interesting to talk about and hear about later is everyone sharing out all of these Zoom links, right? And not just Zoom, all of the major platforms out there to get on a call with people. But those are all out wildly now. So everyone's got the phone number or the link, and you ever know that guy who's just in there, but you don't know who that is? Well, that could be somebody that's trying to like get in on your meeting. So that's something that, you know, I have been looking at even today to try and figure out like how we get a little bit smarter about the things that we're doing. So I believe today, if I have right, we have Daniel Vaz, the Director of Sales Engineering, and James, the Director of Marketing from SKOUT. They are a Palm Beach Tech member. These guys are joining us from outside South Florida, to my understanding, but they do have some South Florida folks. Just to give you a little bit of background right before we throw it to them and have some conversation today. Palm Beach Tech has been working all remote for the last 3 weeks. So this is a good 3 weeks we've been practicing. Myself and Nikki and the team get together every morning for a quick stand-up call where we all pretend to be awake and drink really bad coffee that we put in the microwave for like 30 seconds. So we've been adjusting like everybody else to this new paradigm, and it's pretty good for us because we're a tech organization and we're kind of built for that, like a lot of tech companies are. But one of the things we're actually not seeing too much, and I'm hearing about constantly, are companies that are not able to do that. And actually, most scary is government. I read an article this weekend where a local government entity here in Palm Beach County had 90% of its workforce still coming into the office because they weren't able to pivot and go online. So we do have these issues in our day-to-day life now where we aren't able to really go fully online, and we aren't able to really kind of take into this new paradigm of cybersecurity that we're all just not used to. So that's just some thoughts to me. I'm going to go back to drinking my crappy coffee here and pitch it to James and Daniel for some insights from SKOUT.
Awesome, thank you. I mean, we're super happy to be part of the meeting and be able to talk through this time. It's really interesting time. I think we're actually in the same ballpark as you, Joe. We're about week 3 working from home, and we're doing the same stand-ups. We're doing them actually in the morning and at night, and just talking through goals. And I will say on some side of it, there's been a lot of communication internally, which I think has been extremely helpful. But we are having a lot of discussions where there are more threats, and just as you spoke of Zoom, right? We're seeing those instances come up. So today we wanted to talk through just kind of some more ideas of what types of attacks there are out there. So we do have a couple slides that we were going to go through, just give you guys a little context, and then hopefully that'll stir up some discussion and we can talk through any questions you guys have. Perfect. Yeah, Jimmy, if you just want to kick it off.
Sure, let's, how about you introduce yourself, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Daniel Vaz. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering here at SKOUT. Before SKOUT, I spent 10 years at Datto Backup. So I'm really well versed in backup, business continuity, disaster recovery. That's really where I learned of the environment. For me, I spent a lot of time working with managed service providers and SMBs at that time. So I know this landscape really well.
Thanks, Dan. And my name is James Hatzel. I'm the director of marketing at SKOUT. I currently live in New York City, but I did live in Boynton Beach and Boca Raton for a little bit as well. And I worked in IT down there, and now I'm in marketing. I have a background in cybersecurity as well. I kind of wish I was in South Florida right now, considering how hard New York City's hit. Thankfully, I was able to get out of the city. So I'm currently staying with some family right now, but yeah, just here to talk a little bit about cyber and also about communication plans. And I'll kick it back over to Dan here to talk about some of the major threats we see. And if anybody wants to chime in, feel free to. We want to run through these kind of quick and, hopefully get some discussion going.
No, it's a great point, Jimmy. I know we definitely want this to be more open and more of a conversation. Talking to a lot of managed service providers and individuals in the industry, thinking about what's keeping us up at night, really, I think it is probably a good place to start. I think everyone's always thought of business email compromise, right? It's something out there, and we have plenty of ways to protect against it, right? Individuals will go out there and they'll place a spam filter. There's a lot of technologies that you can use here, but as simple as it can be, right? I think this is usually the number one attack entry point is usually starting off right at the email. Ransomware is huge. I mean, it's all over the news. I think ransomware is finally in the mainstream, right? Where even the end user who's not really technically savvy, they're starting to understand it more and more. This is really scary for the business owners in my mind, right? Just because there's a cost associated, there's brand that can be hit during during a ransomware attack. And ransomware is just continuously evolving, right? We know that the attackers are making profits, so there's a driver, there's a reason for them to continue on this motion. And then something that's actually really interesting is the thought of moving to the cloud. We see it more and more, right? There's a new SaaS application that spins up all the time, and this actually moves the attack. Historically it was, how do I get on the network? Once I'm on there, I can browse, I can get where I need to go. Now really we're seeing attackers work on exploits, right? There's a ton of applications, a ton of moving parts, but now it's more so, how do I find an exploit in one of these SaaS providers? How do I get access to the data as quickly as possible? And then the attacks start building.
Yeah, and just to add to what Dan was saying, I think there's a major misconception about, is the cloud secure? We have this quote from Gartner saying that by 2022, their prediction is 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. And what that means is people will move their servers to the cloud, or they might move their files to, like, say, an Amazon S3 storage bucket, which is a cloud storage application. But they might not secure them properly. They might not limit the access to certain applications or IP addresses or MAC addresses, and then these become unsecured. So what's happening when we see major breaches, it's not necessarily that someone did a major hack and got into something. That does happen a lot. But just as often, we're seeing an unsecured database, which basically means that some website or some customer database or file storage server was left just open for the public. And a hacker, instead of really like targeting an attack and social engineering someone, they just use Google or another search engine to just find the information. And it was out there unsecured. So that's one of the big problems with cloud security, and a common misconception that people have. It's whether or not Google or Amazon is secure. They are generally secure and they have great security protocols. It's not 100%, but as you move information into the cloud, how are you using their security features to make sure that information is locked down that should be locked down? And to go in, we talked a little bit about ransomware and the targets of them. Ransomware started out targeting consumers, and now it has fully shifted to primarily targeting businesses, specifically small businesses. In attacks, we used to see most attacks on the enterprise, where they were very, very specific and targeted, and they spent a lot of time on them. Now what we see is ransomware gangs and hacker groups. They're just spraying and praying. They're sending out automated applications to search for exploits in the wild and vulnerable systems. And they're using a game of numbers technique where they're just looking for a foothold or a way to get in, and they're not necessarily targeting things as much. So that's why it has moved to small businesses, particularly so where a business that might have been 2-3 people might have not been as at risk a couple years ago. Now they're at a significantly greater risk.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's important to think about what defenses are actually in place today. And I mean, this almost kind of mirrors a little bit of the old OSI model, but when you think about it, we have system level, you know, we're thinking about, you know, what safeguards are actually there to get in place. Network security, right? It's your firewall. It's anything preventing you to actually obtain access to the network. Applications, you know, we're thinking about password mandates, 2FA, right? Well, what types of security are actually in place there? And then when we think of transmission, it's all the way down to the protocol. So you can really look at it from operating system, network, the specific applications, and even the protocols there. So it is a wide variety of ways that you can actually get into the site, and ways that we need to think about protecting the site. So here is actually kind of a little talk track to think about and get your mind wrapped around what we're seeing out there. So really, you know, we have an attacker out there, and just to Jimmy's point, there's a lot of spraying and praying, right? Where we're blasting out a lot of attacks to see where I can actually get infiltrated, and typically that's done through email. So we're trying to get in place. We're sending out a phishing email. You know, there's always that story that there's one user that's going to click on everything, right? So a phishing email goes through, user actually clicks on it. Maybe they download some application, but something's running within the system. And at that point, I've compromised that user. And I think this is really scary for our current theme, where users are at home, because there's almost that separation we talk about. You know, it's almost church and state when you think of corporate versus personal, right? Users might be on a personal machine that's not secure. So it's a little easier to get into that point. But we're running on the machine. If we are you know, connected over VPN, or they are home at the corporate office, we're trying to connect and see what assets are available. So, you know, maybe we're on the network scanning for a file share, but we're connecting back out. So we got online, we let the attackers know, hey, we're online, we're on an endpoint. This is where the attacker has some decisions to make. And here, usually the attacker is going to try to impersonate the identity of that individual, right? I might have access to their email, I might have access to their system, but I've now compromised that corporation, and I can impersonate them. And my goal is really to get my hands on some data, right? That's the goal. That's the IP. That's what the organization is there doing. So once I get a hold of that, I now have the assets, and that's where I can either throw it onto the dark web, or I can do, you know, ransomware with it. But as simple as an email is typically where we see most of the attacks starting from. And yeah, you know, this basically we're looking at it, it's the kill chain. So you kind of think about it, right? How do I get in? There's plenty of vehicles that allow users to get into the site or into the network. SKOUT actually has a threat advisory that we send out weekly. So if you guys ever wanted to get part of that, we send out, you know, what attacks we're seeing, what's new, what's in the news. So that'll keep your eyes open and aware. But, you know, we're taking advantage of whatever is available at that time. We're getting into the system. We're trying to make it as automated as possible. And, you know, usually what they're doing there, they're encrypting, or they're going to go ahead and sell some of those assets on the dark web.
And I think
go ahead. Sorry, Jimmy. You go. Do you have anything?
Sure. I think it's also important to talk about how cybersecurity has changed over the past 5 years. Historically, what we saw was a signature-based AV, and what we mean by that is an antivirus that looked up the footprint or the signature or fingerprint, anything like that. That's a common description of them, of a virus and just scanned every file coming in to decide whether or not a file was a virus. So the problem with that now is ransomware gangs have actually productized viruses, and anyone can go in on the dark web and buy a customized virus that won't show up in a signature-based antivirus. We detect new types of viruses trying to attack systems on a weekly basis, and we'll actually report them to Homeland Security or the Department of Homeland Security in our information sharing program, so they can be added to signature-based detection systems. But it's really important to have behavioral-based detection systems, or the newer antivirus products or anti-malware endpoint security products that are detecting things based on what's happening on a system, not necessarily what is on a system. And this goes the same with firewalls. You used to be able to lock down a firewall following basic, in and out, least privileged security. But now you need to be changing a firewall on a regular basis. So you need some sort of automation there or security monitoring. And then spam filters. It used to be spam filters were pretty good. It would flag things as spam. But right now we're seeing things get through the spam filter regularly. And when you make spam filters hypersensitive, it actually decreases business productivity where important emails are getting missed. So there's a thing called computer vision or artificial intelligence, utilizing these types of technologies to be able to act as if it was some human looking at an email versus just an automated system detecting certain words and flagging it as spam. And then for business email compromise, 5 years ago, it used to be as simple as creating a strong password policy where users would change their passwords every 90 days. That way it would stop users from having leaked passwords on the dark web, compromising their whole system. But now you need, business email compromise protection, which includes two-factor authentication or some sort of security monitoring to make sure that a business email isn't already taken advantage of or exploited. Anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit it perfectly. It's just a mind shift change, and we just have to stay on top of where the market's going. I think it's really important there.
Great. And then now the fourth part, we're talking about communication. So it's important to communicate with either your customers, your clients, or your employees a way of security. And when we're talking about communication, we're talking about cybersecurity communication, but we're also talking about just general business communication. So the sentiment of your emails or your calls and the tone of your message is really important during these times. Everyone's got a business running. Everyone needs, they need their customers to buy, or they need their customers to interact with them. But they also need to support their customers, vendors, and partners through this, this crisis. And it's a very touchy subject. So I think a good start of it is just sending your being of help to your clients, employees, vendors, colleagues, whoever it is, and giving them some sort of resource. So what we've done is we sent all of our clients a checklist for remote worker security. And Dan can cover some of the key aspects of what to do to secure your remote worker. But I would take this as a symbol for other businesses out there and see if you can either, you're welcome to use this. We're happy to brand it as whatever organization who's a member of the tech of Palm Beach Tech, or we can even brand it as Palm Beach Tech and send it out to everyone. We'd be happy to do that. But what thing can you create, or what reason to communicate with your clients, whether it's this is how we're handling the crisis, or this is what we're doing for you? What reason to give out, to reach out, and what thing can you give to support the people you interact with is really what is important here. And I'll hand it back to Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to open it up for some questions if there are any. I mean, this checklist is very helpful. I mean, you guys can see where, the separation is between IT internal, what we need to work on, what the employees at home should be working on, and also some awareness topics. But I know we just went through a ton, and I want to make sure if anyone has any questions, concerns, comments, we do have more of a discussion.
I have one. How are you guys are approaching working with PaaS applications as opposed as IaaS applications?
So I think really for us, that's where we do have a very long list of integrations for our log monitoring. So, I think the hard part is we can be as proactive as we want, right? We can have endpoint software, we can try to protect at the phishing attacks. But at some point, we also need to be a little bit on the monitoring end as to what has occurred and what is occurring. So we do have a very long list of supported applications that are older technologies that we can actually ingest logs from, determine what behavior should and should not be occurring, and then act and provide remediation based on those activities. And I think that's really where, you start seeing the conversation of the SIEM and SOC start coming into place, right? And, I think generally the driver for the most part has always been compliance needs, right? I need to manage these logs or view this data because I need to hit a checkbox somewhere. But in the near future, as the vehicles and the attacks constantly change, at some point it's how do I stay updated and how do I make sure I'm constantly protected? And the best way is to constantly monitor, determine what normal behavior looks like, and then process that data. Jimmy, any other thought there?
Yeah. Another question. Yeah. I mean, the question is, I mean, the reason is because at some point we were looking internally for several tools, like specifically web application firewalls, and noticed like different vendors, or most of them, require us to install software on the server. However, either in Amazon or you name it, or Google or Azure, if you architect your applications, platform as a service, exclusively for the platform, you kind of are more, it's more in your hands, right? Like you were saying, totally right. It's in the application developer or the architect to defend the application. However, you cannot install anything. So that's where the end, defending services as opposed as defending services come into place, and not every major vendor has tools for that. Right now what we're using is we have two options, either using Cloudflare or Barracuda as a service. But they're like more like a plug and play, on your architectures, as opposed as installing anything, because we don't have, most of it, we don't have access to servers. It's more like endpoints and services. And another question that I have for you guys, if in that specific article that you were mentioning from Gartner, did they mention anything about quantum computing and how it's affected already, the SSL game, protecting encryption?
I don't think that article mentioned it specifically, but you're absolutely right. I mean, quantum computing, in theory, would break every form of encryption that we have existing, but also in theory, it could generate stronger encryption. So it would keep, like, when it happens, it would keep new things secure, but old things could be decrypted. So I think, like, it's important to note that your systems, if you're encrypting something with security today, sometime in the future, I don't know if it's 5 years from now or 50 or 500 years from now, someone will be able to decrypt it. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah. Google is claiming already that it can break. They're claiming how they call it, quantum supremacy. That's how they call it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you can use the same tooling, to protect, right? That would be the goal. So we would need to be, looking at that pretty soon.
Yeah, and a quick history on encryption. AES is the current standard for most encryption. And before that, it was DES. And DES is effectively compromised. So, it's a lot easier to decrypt a hard drive or a file that was encrypted with the DES algorithm. So this isn't something new, and it could happen in the future. We've seen it with SSL. For example, your SSL, when you encrypt things, it's based on there's a number associated with it, whether it's 128 or 256. And that is basically the amount of entropy, or how hard it is to decrypt that, or how many guesses it would take. It's sort of associated with that. And it's rumored that the 128 algorithm has been compromised by the NSA. So this is something that's going to continue to happen. And again, it goes with the importance of why you need security monitoring, why you always need to stay on top of your systems and see what happens. Because it's not if you get hacked or if something's compromised, it's a matter of when and how fast you can react to it.
Rush has also made a comment in the chat, said also extending key length.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey guys, this is Joe again. I want to get down to kind of like the simple fact here, and that's that we are using Zoom right now, right? And we could be having some high-level conversations that nobody else should know about, that could be legal or maybe even medical in nature. How do we defend against that? And not just for Zoom, but all of these other platforms that we're on now, because we've switched the way we're doing business. Are you guys seeing anybody who's not doing this right? Do you have to go in and be like, guys, whoa, you're not doing this correct. Let me help you.
Yeah, I think so. Has anyone seen the show Mr. Robot? Anyone? No. So Mr. Robot is a show on USA, and it's pretty known for using real hacking techniques in the show. It's not like your most TV shows where they just show a stream of code on the screen. But one of the episodes of Mr. Robot, someone joins a FBI conference call because they get forwarded the dial-in information, and this is a real it's a real thing that can happen now. It was typical on the show. It was a fake, it's a fictional show. But it is that simple to join someone's conference call. So whether it is a private accounting conference call or a medical conference call, whatever it is, if you're just sending out a dial-in information and not monitoring who is on the actual call, you could run into that issue where information or internal information is effectively being leaked. So in Zoom, you can require authentication before joining a call. Another recommendation would be to make sure you have the desktop open of Zoom, because then you can see the numbers and people that were dialed in. But even if someone joins the Zoom, they can type in any name that they are. So that's why it's important to have an authenticated version of Zoom. And Zoom actually put out guidelines and directions on how to do this. In addition to that, we've actually seen malicious versions of Zoom pop up. So hackers are seeing such an increase in Zoom that they're saying, here is a free version of Zoom, download it here, and then it's actually a virus where someone gets access to your computer. We saw that with the coronavirus live maps. We actually our Security Operations Center, that's what we mean by SOC, did an investigation on one of the coronavirus live map websites that was malicious. They opened it up in a sandbox, which basically means a computer that doesn't have access to any other network, so you can download viruses on it, and found that attackers were actually using that website and to take control of user systems. So the two takeaways from this are, if you're having sensitive calls, take them on the desktop one, but also use Zoom authentication methods or whatever video conference authentication methods. You can require a password for a meeting. And then two, watch out for phishing or malicious fake versions of video conference software like Zoom, perhaps WebEx or Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams that are imitating the actual thing.
Mike had his hand up here for a question too.
Yeah, I was curious. Can you share that last slide that you were on? Is that possible?
Sure. Actually, I think, how did I just send like the actual link to?
Well, a question on, I think, one of the points on it.
I was thinking, I don't know if you have it virtually somewhere on the SKOUT website, but maybe post the link to Facebook too, like
Sure.
to that, the comment stream.
Yeah, let me do that real quick.
I'll be happy to share it to my network in LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I had a question. I think two of the points, I'm trying to think back to, two of the points were make sure that end users' equipment is up to date. Work from home users' equipment's up to date, right? So you want to make sure their firmware has been updated. And then also Wi-Fi security, making sure they've got the right encryption on there. In reality, like, what are you seeing from the work from home workforce and their ability to do those things? Is that something that the average at-home worker can technically do themselves or comfortably do themselves? Something I've been questioning, right? So,
Yeah, I don't think so.
yeah. So what's the solution?
Yeah,
That seems like
it's difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's a good opportunity for security providers to jump in and make some money.
I think that's one part of my question is, are you seeing anybody do that? Like, how do you support this new distributed workforce as a small IT department that's used to supporting their own internal systems and nothing more?
Well,
are you seeing people address
For
that
us specifically, we work with IT providers who partner with us to deliver our services. So, and then it gets really questionable there because it's what's included in the service contract. Can you, is it included that they support the home networks, or is that included in the package that they ordered or not? So for IT providers, it's really important to define those things early. And yes, people are actually, there's a boom. Our IT providers have seen they saw a 40 to 70% uptick in number of tickets, which is an indicator that people cannot do this themselves. But the problem is, it's questionable whether or not they can charge for those services or not charge. But so there is a lot of gray area there. So you're absolutely right. If people can't do it on their own in most cases, then they require someone on the phone to help them.
can't and will. I mean, just will they make the effort? Yeah, I don't know. I was curious to see what you guys were seeing.
And I too, if you can just email that to me directly, I want to see if we can just share that out with our companies. As somebody who has mandated multi-factor authentication to their teams, obviously this is something we have to be careful about, and we have to educate people about, to say, hey, this is part of keeping you guys safe and making sure that our company and organizations are safe. With that, I know we have probably a few other questions here. James, could you dump your email into the chat real quick, just in case anybody else might have some questions for you?
Sure, and I will get after this call. I'm gonna get a version of this checklist with the Palm Beach Tech Association logo on it by SKOUT.
Yeah,
I'll get that sent over to
Yeah,
you.
that'll be great.
And just because this is community coffee, we have to be real about our coffee here for a second. So James, I'll ask you very directly and be honest with me. What coffee are you drinking today?
I'm drinking La Colombe. I believe it's their Peruvian roast. So I made it in the drip coffee maker at my house. Typically, I have a pour over in the morning. I take my coffee very seriously, and that's when my wife and I wake up at different times. Usually, I'm out of the house by 6, so I make a pour over myself, and then she makes one later. But now we're both up at like 7:30 or 8, so I make a full pot.
I'm cheating today because I woke up a little late, so I'm drinking the coffee crystals from Folgers, and I'm dying as I say that. But I do have a wonderful local roast of Pumphouse coffee, which is based in Jupiter. They are still roasting, actually delivering for free, believe it or not. But it was started by somebody I even went to preschool with, so keeping it as local and close to the chest as I can. But I got to tell you, I am definitely out of my cycle for going to coffee shops every morning to take part. So, you know, I'm probably going to have to do some research on how to do what your system is doing, because this ain't cutting it today. Anyway, we are almost out of time. We got about 5 more minutes left. If anybody has any last minute thoughts or questions to throw in there.
Regarding mobile security.
Yeah, I can actually throw in a mobile device management policy. So mobile security, a couple things. Basics is don't install apps that are outside of the Play Store. Then keep corporate and personal separate. Now, if you're not keeping corporate and personal separate and your business has a BYOD policy, you need to define that up front. And then if in BYOD means bring your own device. And with a bring your own device policy, it's important to have MDM, or mobile device management, that defines what information a company can wipe or can't wipe off a phone. So for example, my phone, I have a BYOD policy with SKOUT. If I worked in the security operations center, I would not be able to have this, but because I work in marketing, I can. And SKOUT has permission to wipe off files associated with my job from my phone. So they can basically anything in my OneDrive or my email, they can remote wipe that, and they have permission to do that. But things on my phone outside of that, they do not have permission to access that information, and that's defined in our IT department. So it's important to have some sort of MDM program, whether that's just as simple as the Office 365 mobile device management, or something, something bigger, a full-blown MDM application. And it might just, you might do the same thing with desktops as well, or laptops, and use something like Workspace ONE on that. But I'm going to post in the MDM recommendations as well in the chat.
And does that include mobile development security practices?
Yeah. So mobile development practices, so it should only be worked on a work laptop. I know a lot of people are it's a super gray area right now and a huge security flaw because people don't have enough laptops out there. And there are code, so if you're editing in a cloud native environment, it's a lot easier to have a distributed a group of software engineers securely. So basically, if someone's connecting through an encrypted laptop that has some sort of mobile device management software on it, basically it's connected to a domain, and they're pushing their code, whether it's using Net or something like that, or a Cloud9, AWS's version of it, and they're pushing it to the cloud. So it's staying in a secure system and securely being transmitted to the cloud. The problem that happens is people are running local instances of an application on an unsecured laptop. That laptop gets left at an airport, behind at a coffee shop. Someone breaks into someone's house and steals it and sells it to someone. Then someone has the entire application from the local copy on someone's laptop. So having really strong laptop level encryption, and then also log off policies where a computer is automatically logged off after a certain amount of time and turning off your computer too. So a lot of if a computer is encrypted at the hard drive level and the computer is off, it is much, 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 much harder than for a hacker to break into it than if the computer was on. And if the computer's on, it's harder for a hacker to break in if they are logged out than if they're logged in.
So, hey guys, we're gonna have to cut it short here just for a second to review multi-factor authentication, pour over coffee, and check out. We'll share this checklist out there too. Briefly before I go, we're gonna keep these conversations going every single week. Is there anybody who has any topic ideas that they'd like to hear while we are doing our Zoom community coffees?
IT sales.
IT sales, okay.
Yeah, that's
Definitely.
like,
Yeah, definitely a different paradigm for that now, right?
yeah. I've seen so many, sales gurus out there, but none of them, at least in my view, the ones that I have, I don't know if you have, if you guys have, hear about, Brian Tracy. Yes, no, maybe.
No, but we'll
Grant
look into
Cardone.
it.
How about Grant Cardone?
Oh, I know Grant Cardone. Yeah. So,
Awesome.
so we got software sales. Anybody else have any other topics they want to hear about? All right. So next time we're just gonna sit down next week, and I'm just gonna drink coffee for 30 minutes. Everyone can watch. I might make Cuban. We'll see. But thank you all so much. Again, this is streaming on Facebook. If you guys want to check it out later and go back, we'll of course share the documentation. Want to thank Daniel. Want to thank James so much for joining us here, and hope everyone has a great rest of their Monday.
Thank you, too.
Thank
See you guys.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.